Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We've got quite a few people in the UK, but we've got some people from around Europe. We'll probably try and give you some name checks a bit later on if you'd like to. As always with our Zoom webinars, that we want to make them as interactive as possible. There's a Q&A window in Zoom, and we'd ask you to put your questions in there. We've already got a fair few in advance that people have sent via Twitter or direct to myself or Nikk, who will be opening the presentation shortly. So with us today, hopefully you can see them all. We've got Dr. Farhaan Mohideen, a good friend of ours. He's an Intel product specialist and the IoT spokesman for Europe, Middle East and Africa. And we have Roy Baharav, who is an entrepreneur, an Israeli startup. He's done many Israeli startups. He's currently the CEO of Hi Auto Conversation AI, which is, I have to say, Roy, without upsetting you, it's the weirdest name for a company ever. And it's very, very difficult to Google. But what Roy's company is doing is some groundbreaking stuff in AI with voice and voice ordering. I think the name comes because they started off in the automobile manufacturing business. Roy can explain that a bit later on. A fascinating company that's doing some really great work. And when you see some of the videos that we have today, you'll be pretty much gobsmacked, I think. So the subject for today is drive and collect. We're talking about QSR, maximizing efficiency. I don't think we've got any Americans on the call, probably too early for them, but in the US, of course, this is often called curbside collection or drive-through, but curbside collection seems to be a big term for them. Nikk Smith and his team have done a fantastic job in also pioneering some of this space. And in order to help Intel with some bits and pieces, they've put some rendering mock-up type things together to try and explain, or best explain, how the whole thing works. So again, ask the questions. We can interrupt any presenter to ask questions, so answer questions as you see fit. And I'm going to hand it over to Nikk now, who will just take you through a few slides.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Just move on. So the overview of the presentation is we're going to basically look at how we could see the drive-through setup evolving in the near future. We're looking at both the physical design of a drive-through operation and also the integration of the technology into the operation. Really, as they work totally hand in hand, but we've separated them out for the kind of to make this presentation linear, really, in that way. The general aim of the kind of the thought process when we were going through this is to used both the digital and physical changes to kind of make the proposition of a drive-through much more effective, both from a commercial perspective, an operational perspective, and also experientially. The key thing to kind of say is, a lot of the time people expect, these kind of future ideas to be miles and miles away, but actually nothing we're really showing is not a million miles away at all. It's all being done in isolation. Typically, what a concept might exist on its own, but what we've done is try to pull a lot of the things that are happening in disparate companies across the world together into one solution, really, with a couple of things on top that aren't necessarily being done at the moment. The key thing to say is we have done quite a lot of renders and graphics to support this presentation, but we're not architects. So if you see something on an image and think, well, that wouldn't work in reality, well, that's because we're not architects. So don't be too harsh. So the drivers of change that we see pushing these kind of things forward, really, is firstly, I suppose, is the pandemic. Really, the increase in traffic through drive-throughs has been huge during the year of COVID, really, but it was really building on the existing momentum in the market. So it was always going to happen, but COVID's accelerated it, like it has many changes, really. One of the key things in the current drive-through design, pretty much across the board, really, is that they're all limited by the design and space constraints that they have. There's been big efforts by a lot of the providers to use technology to kind of speed the throughput of transactions through drive-throughs, using things like pre-ordering and kind of fast track lanes and things like that. But ultimately, there's always going to be a limit on the number of transactions you can kind of make through a physical lane. Another thing that's happening, obviously, in the market is that the delivery providers People like Deliveroo are becoming major players. You know, they've received huge funding and are kind of, you know, the entry point into a lot of the kind of the market now. And, you know, those guys are starting the process of rolling out dark kitchens that are driven by app-based purchases. For those that don't know, dark kitchens are essentially kitchens without restaurants attached. So they're kind of really efficient operations that are all kind of driven by that initial digital interaction from the customer. Another aspect that, you know, we think is probably going to drive some of this change as well is that the kind of the final mile delivery costs of things like click and collect are huge in proportion to the cost of distribution to kind of major hubs. So we think that probably will be a bit of a driver of change as well in the kind of the drive-through market. And you know, click and collect is basically a very, very efficient way for people to operate. It just extracts and removes that cost from the chain. And obviously, you know, the driver of all business really is the kind of always extraction of the maximum ROI from any investment. And, you know, a drive-through site is a big, big investment. You know, you've always got the huge land costs, but also, you know, the development of the kitchens themselves, you know, represent a big investment for any brand. So on to the changes. As I say, we're separating them into physical and digital changes, but they would work hand in hand. So bear that in mind.
I've got a quick question, actually. I'm best suited to think, well, for Farhaan. How big an opportunity does Intel see drive-through? You obviously work in almost every single vertical sector there must be, but how big do you see drive-through?
Drive-through is quite a significant market. I mean, it was predominantly used mainly in the US, but since the pandemic, what we've seen is that this is, you know, spreading across Europe very widely. In the past, you would have noticed, like in Germany, for instance, they were not very popular there, and now McDonald's is rolling out over 1,000 drive-through restaurants. I mean, it's a significant investment, but at the same time, you know, because of all the technology that is there for Intel, it's a good opportunity as well, with the screens that are being put and all of the connected devices that goes in there.
Cool. So physical change one is that we're proposing that there could be such a thing as a dark drive-through. So it's extrapolating the idea of a dark kitchen to the drive-through environment, removing the requirement for the sit-in facilities. Essentially frees up a lot more space for the actual drive-through operations themselves, which obviously gives a significant increase in capacity. We aren't suggesting that, you know, all drive-throughs would be dark. So what we are suggesting is you might have a modular design. So you could take effectively a dark drive-through and have a modular kitchen restaurant facility bolted on. So the idea, we think, is that, you know, the dark drive-through would be well suited to kind of urban environments where spaces are at a premium and people aren't necessarily on long journeys where they need a break. Whereas the kitchen add-on, as it were, would be more suited to typical kind of highways and service areas. But having that design as a modular and also keeping the space at a premium is one of the kind of key things we think represents a kind of physical change that will probably happen. There is there certainly have been some conceptual things that we've seen in the market. I don't think there's anything being particularly rolled out as yet. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the market is certainly going to consider this and move forward down this route. The physical change too, which you'll have seen on the previous, is the multi-lane formats but with over kitchens. So kind of trying to take a better advantage of the footprint that you've got in the site that is available, having a kind of two-story design where the cars actually travel underneath the kitchens themselves means you can make maximum use of the space available. And obviously with multi-lanes, as soon as you've got more lanes, your capacity hugely increases. It just allows a lot more throughput than you would get from a typical 1 or 2 lane drive-through, which seems to be the standard at the moment.
There's this is a question for me, Nikk. Just looking at your lovely designs, the similarity to a huge petrol or gas forecourt has to be seen. Is there any similarities in what the other panelists see with what we're trying to do here? We had we had an Intel speaker 2 days ago at our grid serve event down in Braintree, Essex, which where we did forecourt of the future. I know forecourt doesn't seem to be a term that translates well to the Americans, but it's, you know, the petrol station. We call it the gas station forecourt. Any thoughts from that perspective as well? Anybody? Farhaan maybe, or Roy?
I think I know my colleague slips his name, but yeah, he did talk about forecourts. I think the similarities comes where we're trying to create this experience for customers when they actually either come to a drive-through or to a forecourt station. It's giving that, you know, the information that they require, and also, you know, it looks simple, right? It looks like, hey, I'm driving a car to a particular destination, getting my food, and moving on. And with the forecourt, I'm driving my car, charging my car, and then moving on. But these are, I mean, from the outside, when you look at it, it's so simple, but the number of connected devices here makes that experience more complete. And that's where the similarities are. But if you look at the differences, in the forecourt, you're going to be spending much more time until the car charges. But the important thing with drive-through is that speed and convenience is number one. So what we want to do is we want to give the right kind of messaging, which is different to the forecourt, right kind of messaging, so that the customer can drive in, get their food, and leave as quickly as possible.
Right.
And it was Ian Butcher who spoke on that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was Ian. Farhaan. Ian also made a very good point, which I guess not many people have thought about. He did a great presentation. He listed all the things that you now get, you know, whether it be Wi-Fi, security systems, point of sales, digital billboards, etc., etc., etc. And then he made the point, well, where do you put all this equipment? And I think he may have referenced a McDonald's. If you've ever seen a McDonald's kitchen, there's not very much space to put things there. How does Intel handle that then? Is that something that virtualization can help with? Absolutely.
I mean, the amount of servers or the amount of digital devices that go in is so much. It's huge. The kitchen operations has the KDS device. You have the point of sale. You have, you know, all of these digital signage. It all requires computing power. Instead of having those individual, you know, hubs, what you can do is take a couple of servers, virtualize them, and drop, you know, your services on top of that. And it's absolutely the same for forecourts as well. Edge computing plays such a big part in both of these verticals.
I think that, you know, the general kind of direction of forecourts as well is going to change hugely, isn't it? Just because of the fact that we're going to be moving away from petrol, which is a very, very rapid transaction, to you know, a kind of a charging type solution, which, you know, is definitely not. You know, you're looking at a minimum 20-minute wait time for a charge of a car. So, you know, on the highway version of this drive-through, you would have a lot more space, and obviously that's why the kitchens would be part of that process. So, you know, you're kind of capitalizing on that as well. So I can, you know, really the formats almost merge in the highway context, really, you know, where you're kind of looking at more a traditional services, but you still perhaps want that throughput for the drive-through where people just want to get on their journey and not hang around.
Right. Well, just we have a question for Roy. While we're on the topic of the virtualization and the large amounts of computer equipment that could be needed, what sort of computing power is needed to do the voice ordering stuff? Is that something that's done on site, or is it done in the cloud, or does that add to the issue with crowding the computer room or the computer rack in the site? Question for Roy.
Yeah. Hi everyone. So definitely voice requires computing power, especially if you know, you want to get to a very fast processing. It can be done both on the cloud and on site. We are planning to have our solution running on device, so that in case you have an internet shutdown, the system continues to work. currently we're still working on the cloud, but I think definitely we would need some resources. I don't think that we're talking, I don't know, my feeling is that the solution that Farhaan talked about is going to provide also all the computing needs of a conversational AI as well.
Thank you. Sorry, Nikk, I took you. So I want to answer the questions from our social media
fine.
audience.
I'd rather be interrupted, to be honest. It makes it more interesting. So just one thing that's probably not clear with these over kitchens as well is that obviously there would be no one on that ground floor anymore. So essentially what we'd be doing is delivering the orders using a kind of a dumbwaiter style, if everyone kind of knows what they are. Essentially it's a lift for the products. There's actually a product made by Frankie that's already addressing that kind of need. I think it's called the transporter, and essentially it's a method of getting fast food orders, you know, from the kitchens to another place using conveyors and pickers and things like that. It's really clever. So the physical change 3 is multi-brand accommodation. So we're all pretty much used to kind of single brand drive-throughs, which you know obviously has been the kind of probably status quo for the last 20 years or so. But what we think is if you've got 5 lanes of capacity, actually most of the time you won't be running at full capacity at all. So the way to get around that and kind of have a kind of a more even distribution of orders is to have different brands, all complementary, using the same space. So this kind of mirrors what Deliveroo are doing with their dark kitchens, where they're having individual kitchens in one physical space. They're segregated, so they operate independently, but they're all under one roof. And it's a similar kind of concept to that, really, but just applied to the drive-through scenario. And I know, Roy, when we talked before, you know, in America, you were saying that there's some franchisees that were also doing multi-brand on one site as well, yeah?
Yeah, so I recently spoke with there is this large franchisee called the Love's Travel Stops, where they are actually they have different concepts. So you go into one Love's Travel Stop and you have a Subway, Arby's. You go to another, you have Dunkin' and something else. And I think it's what you're suggesting here is a great opportunity for a franchisee to give a more compelling offering to their customers. And from the perspective of a customer that comes in, they can, sometimes, they can get the best of the different concepts.
Yeah. So that brings us on to our first digital change, really. So if you have multiple brands on a site, how do you accommodate them properly and take advantage of the fact that they might have different offers at different time of days, and they may kind of intermix in how they appeal to the customers at different times of days. So that's with flexible branding. So we've been doing quite a lot of projects with flexible branding over the years. Our very first one was at Manchester Airport about must be 15 years ago now, where they wanted to make the check-in desks flexibly branded, so that they didn't have to have fixed hoardings and light boxes, and basically means that the check-in desks were effectively not utilized for 60% of the time, because the flight patterns just didn't allow it, really. So we put a huge array of rear projection screens above every check-in desk, and we had a 1-to-1 ratio of screens to desk. So that you could actually flexibly brand right down to kind of the granular level of one desk to one brand. This is the same concept, really. What we're doing is we're wrapping the kind of building in large format LED, so that you can apply the branding and kind of have the building be your promotional surface, rather than it be a separate billboard, which is more traditional. And we've also got the totem at the front there, which you can see is basically just gives us total flexibility to kind of have the brand hierarchies. So the idea being that the brands that would be most suitable for the time of day would be kind of, basically given the top priority, so that they have the biggest visibility. And then we've effectively got then the ability to do day parting. So if you have a brand that has a compelling offer at a certain time of day, and here my video keeps freezing for some reason. then basically we can promote that brand and the offers and kind of the products that are a part of that offer there. As you can see, if the video is actually playing in PowerPoint.
No, Nick, it's that's excellent, because it's a little bit, obviously McDonald's are probably the best known for day parting, because the breakfasts are available to 10:30 or 11 o'clock, I think. Long time since I've been to one. Again, during the forecourt of the future event, I think Ian also showed some great pictures of, there's in Dubai, I think probably it's been done for the World Expo, but there's been a couple of petrol gas stations, I keep using both words, completely wrapped in LED. You know, and it does change. I mean, it can be done, you know, if you don't have an award-winning agency like Pixel Inspiration doing it, for example, there's your plug, Nick. You know, it can look very gaudy. And some of it did look a bit gaudy with the pictures as well, but it's the World Expo, you know, but it can change the color, you know, by night. There was talk of things like, you know, when you got football or soccer matches in a region, you can change the color depending on the teams that are coming through, sort of thing. So there's some very clever stuff that can be done. And of course, it's also in our forecourt of the future event, Fiona Fitzgibbon from Diversify Media, who's done lots of work in the media sales space, of course, for many years now, was talking about the media sales opportunity, which is fantastic. So there's so many different multiple opportunities for revenue here as well. So
yeah, absolutely,
it's very good. And of course, LED is coming down in price; it's going up in quality.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's excellent. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And Nick, if I may, I'm also assuming that in addition to all of these graphics that you show, you also attach various types of sensors to this, so that you know if it's hot, how do you want to promote something new. You want to look at giving some information around what's happening around the vicinity and so on and so forth. So it's much more intelligent compared to what we are used to, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think most people just assume that a screen is just going to run a kind of fixed playlist for a day part, and it's absolutely doesn't have to do that at all. Even in kind of relatively basic retail settings, we're applying weightings and conditions on things to make sure that the content that's playing back is going to be most adapted to the kind of real-time scenario. So this video that's actually playing now, which is quite nice, is showing how you can kind of utilize localized temperature settings to again weight that, because you might find that a particular item across the menu, the breadth of the menus at this drive-through that's available is going to be really suited to kind of very hot days. So that's the kind of thing you'd start promoting, just because you're going to capitalize on the fact that people react to things that are relevant to them at that moment in time.
And maybe I wanted to also mention, I think I just read another Intel project with a RBI on how to actually utilize this in order to provide customers with things that they would desire more, do essentially better promotions that are more personalized. And I think I think RBI used the Intel AI stack, and it shows some good results. I don't know, maybe Farhaan, you can talk about it.
Sure. So I think what you're referring to is the platform agnostic OpenVINO software stack that we have. So what it allows our partners to do is to build their algorithms and then pretty much deploy it in any one of our hardware stack that we've got. It makes it much more simpler. You write it once and get to deploy it across VPUs, GPUs, and CPUs, and it all works very, very seamlessly.
Cool. So our third physical change is what we're calling feeder lanes. So because we've now got these 5 or more lanes in our drive-through, the last thing we want is for people to kind of just decide for themselves where they want to go. So we want to be a bit more intelligent about that. So the idea is that we use feeder lanes to control the traffic and route it intelligently to where it should go. This is going to be really important, because especially when you've got multiple brands being hosted within the drive-through, each brand and each food type will have a kind of particular set of kind of conditions against it, metadata against it. So it might be things like preparation time, typical kind of service time, things like that. And that will probably be changing as well throughout the day, depending on where the kind of menu sits in the kind of propensity to buy. So what the feeder lane concept is all about is basically using all that data, that preemptive knowledge about what's going on right now in the drive-through, coupled with the choices of the customer to direct them to the right lane, so that you don't get a customer that only wants a coffee being sat behind someone who's waiting for a full grill order that might take a minute to serve. So that's correct. That physical change is really closely coupled with the digital change as well. So, you know, the feeder lane itself would basically need to allow for sensing, so automated sensing of what the customer is going to want. So that's the kind of the pre-ordering apps, connectivity to those, so that as soon as you enter the feeder lane or get close to the restaurant itself, you know, that the kind of system is aware of your presence and the fact that your order is going to be needed to be collected. And you've also got then the ability for people who aren't pre-ordering, because at the end of the day, you know, you can't pre-order if you're driving and you're the only person in the car. You're going to need to basically allow people to make really rapid selections about the brands that they're interested in. And the reason for allowing that, as I say, is you can then direct them to a queue that's going to be most effective for them to be to basically drive through as quickly as possible and get the best service based on the real-time conditions and all the data layers that are going to interact to make that work. Essentially, what you've got after the feeder as well is you've got then the intelligent lanes themselves. So the feeder selections are made, the barrier is going to allow you through, and we're going to augment onto the floor the kind of the directional indicators that we want you to go to, as well as using the kind of number plate recognition to pull the person into the right lane. So we really don't want people to go into the wrong lane, so we're trying to do as much as we can to kind of, you know, draw the eye into the correct path, really. And we're using a kind of combination again of you know, digital kind of content on the screens coupled with the sensors, and as I say, the intelligent lighting as well. The other physical changes, we think that these things will kind of contain segregated delivery driver hubs. When we've been talking with some of our QSR clients, you know, it's quite, I think to a degree, that the whole driver attending the restaurant effectively to pick up orders has kind of caught them almost by surprise to a degree, because it's happened so quickly. But what we're finding is that they don't really want the drivers hanging around inside the restaurant, because it's just not a great experience for the customers who are kind of, you know, sitting in or ordering at that time. So what we're suggesting here is that you use the drive-through as a hub for the kind of the delivered drivers themselves. Give them accommodation so they're not having to hang around smoking outside and all the rest of it, and basically and just tidy up that whole process, really.
It's amazing, isn't it, what we've seen in the last year with restaurants. You know, when we were allowed during the various bits of lockdown in the UK to go in, restaurants had just roped off areas, you know, literally with your buttons and bits of string and rope, and the delivery drivers hang there while they're waiting for their parcels to come in. So you're absolutely right, it's caught everybody by surprise. I don't know what architects are currently thinking when they're now building new restaurants, if they are currently building new restaurants, but hopefully it's similar ideas. Hopefully it is similar ideas to what you've come up with.
Yeah, I think there is definitely a realization that it needs to be accommodated separately to kind of customer traffic, because it's just it's a totally different audience, isn't it? You know, 100%. They don't work particularly well together. So as part of this delivery driver hub, what we're suggesting is that the exact same mechanism for delivering the food orders is employed for the hub as it is for the drive-through. So you've still got the kind of the dumbwaiter lift style. So the kitchen doesn't have to interact in any way differently for a pre-order that's going to be out for delivery compared to a drive-through itself. So again, that simplicity of the fact that an order is an order, however that's fulfilled, it doesn't matter to the kitchen, really helps the efficiency. So that's kind of one of the key changes that we think would be relevant, really. The other thing about the delivery driver hub is inevitably you're going to have delivery drivers kind of hanging around waiting for their orders. So what we can do is utilize that resource to fulfill grill orders. So when you kind of, you'll all know when you've gone to a drive-through, if they can't quickly prepare your meal, they'll send you to a parking bay to kind of wait for someone to deliver it. So the idea here is that kind of process would be fulfilled by the delivery driver hub, so that you kind of utilize utilizing their time to the best degree. And again, you're not having to have a kind of totally different staffing kind of set cost center to kind of manage the grill orders as well.
Nikk, again, did you mention number plate recognition earlier on when you were talking about the feeder lanes?
Yeah,
you did. Okay, and that's pretty common these days, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think it is. Whether it's being, well, I'm pretty sure it's not being used that intelligently at the moment. You know, because ultimately, you know, that you can't make an exact correlation between a number plate and a customer, because obviously people share cars and all the rest of it, and people change cars. But ultimately, it can be used in that real time context to kind of, you know, guide people and kind of track the car through the process as well. You know,
well, of course, well, regular delivery drivers have the same mopeds or the same scooters.
That is true. Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think we'd probably have quite a smaller entrance. We'd keep them away again from the feeder lanes, because you wouldn't take that traffic, you know. So you'd have a scooter only entrance, I would imagine, for these kind of people.
I mean, Nikk, I'm thinking that if customers are willing to share that information, we could use that information to even generate things like loyalty, right? Give them their loyalty points, or even get them to spend their loyalty points based on the correlation that you have with the car and the loyalty account that they might have with the restaurant or, you know, the brand.
Yeah,
there's a lot more you can do.
Yeah. I mean, you've got basically the number plate recognition, and you've got the apps as well, you know, for those kind of things, and you can use one or the other or both in conjunction. I think, you know, ultimately it comes down to, you know, how far the brand or the kind of franchisee wants to take it, really. You know, I think we're looking at this from a very much an operational kind of, you know, efficiency, getting people through the lanes and transacting as quick as possible. But ultimately, the data is the data. You can do what you like with it, can't you?
So we have a question for Farhaan. In terms of the number of screens, this is, I think it's more of it's actually a security question, I think, really. There's quite a number of screens in what you've designed. You've got that nice picture up there. How does Intel contribute from a graphics and a security and a maintenance perspective of that?
Oh, that's such a interesting question. This is something that we've noticed right from the get-go when, you know, digital signage was brought in, and when we started to create these reference designs, is that, you know, these screens are positioned well away from where, you know, you can really maintain it, right? To get somebody out there to maintain these screens is quite difficult. So we built in things like remote manageability, which is inbuilt with all of our SKUs, which is Core i5 and above. So even if you start to see, let's say, content that was not meant to be there, you know, remotely you could bring it down. But even before that happens, we would be able to detect that, you know, because security is inbuilt from the get-go, we'll be able to detect that there's been some kind of intrusion, and you know, gradually shut that screen down. At the same time, let's assume that, you know, the operating system on the screen, or, you know, the information on the screen is incorrect. You can remotely manage that with the vPro technology that we have. So there are many different levels of security that we built into pretty much all of our core compute, so that, you know, you can manage all of these in a secure fashion. I think not many, maybe a couple of years ago, there was some screens where, you know, somebody had basically attacked those screens and put unnecessary graphics. And if things like, you know, vPro was there, you know, it would have been able to, I mean, they would have been able to control that quite easily.
I think that's a key point, really, is, you know, that there's a lot of kind of market momentum for things like the system on chip and using Android in screens and things like that. And whilst that always reduces the cost, the initial CapEx cost, it doesn't necessarily give you the maturity of management of the actual infrastructure. And when you're looking at something like this, where it's absolutely business critical, you know, we would always say, you know, going down the route of something like you know, an Intel platform using Windows or Linux as the operating system, it's an enterprise level solution, rather than something that's been based on a, you know, a mobile operating system that's purely there to kind of reduce cost. It has its place without doubt, but I think in something like this, where you're looking at business criticality and lots of layers of integration, it's the platform that we would certainly recommend. So adaptable menu. So obviously we have the feeder lane choices, the sensing. That's basically, we now know what the customer's intentions are as they reach the lane itself that they've been directed to. Because we've got this multi-brand format, you know, you've got a lot of SKUs that you potentially need to kind of display to the customer. So what we've got is this concept of adaptability in the menu, so that we know that the choices are X, Y, and Z. So what we can then use is the data and analytics and machine learning aspects of the technology to assemble the menus in real time. So, you know, traditionally you would have a menu board and it might be day parted, but that's as clever as it will get. What we can do is we can basically say, okay, well, there's the choices of the customer, and these are the items that have the highest level of propensity that for this day part, for this type of customer, in conjunction with the fact that they may have pre-ordered something as well. So we can exclude the pre-ordered items from the menu, because why would you show them something twice they've already made a choice on? And that's the idea, really. We're really kind of flexing the digital menus to the maximum degree, really, to just help that process and help the decision, and again, speed up the transaction, but also give the customer the kind of the choices that they're most likely to be appealing to them.
We have just coming up, we had a question from somebody who was talking about, it would have been for Roy, it can still be, but it was about how you can talk to the screens. It's something we've not really seen. It's one of those weird things. I think certainly the AV people on this call will have been to a number of big shows, and there was sort of, I don't want to be rude, but there was sort of a pretense that things like Alexa and things could end up talking to screens, and it never really, or to kiosks or whatever, it never seemed to really work. And the question is, you know, what can somebody who's really clever do with the conversation bit? But maybe, Roy, is this something that you're going to show now? Have I jumped in too soon with the question?
I don't know about the clever, someone that is clever. I wouldn't take that compliment, but we are working on this kind of solutions. I think that one of the reasons that Alexa and Siri are, you know, have limitations is because they're trying to generalize the discussion. You can talk to Siri about whatever, right? What's going on with Bitcoin? What's the weather? When are we getting out of lockdown? You can ask any question, and maybe it's going to answer, maybe not. What we are focusing on with Drive-Thru conversational AI is we're focusing on a very narrow type of conversation, just about ordering food at the drive-thru. So if you want to talk about food, we can answer those questions really, really well. We can have this conversation. You're talking just like you're talking to a person. And maybe the best thing would be to watch a couple of customer interactions from Ohio in the US, and then we can maybe talk a bit more about how this can tie into what Nikk has presented.
Welcome, Elise. Would you like to try our fish and chips combo for $6.49 today?
No, thank you. I would like to get chicken pot pie, and then I'd like to get your two-piece chicken dinner with all white meat with mashed potatoes and gravy and green beans, and a large Dr. Pepper, please, with extra ice.
Sure. Substituting a breast will be $1.50.
That's fine.
Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine.
Would that be all for you today?
Yes, it is.
Your total is $12.53.
All right, thank you.
We'll see you at the window.
All right, thank you.
Welcome, Elise. Would you like to try our fish and chips combo for $6.49 today?
No, ma'am.
Please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Please, can I have a 3-piece chicken tender meal with coleslaw and mashed potatoes?
Would that be all for you today?
I I want two of those or that order, the same.
Sure.
And also, can I have your ranch, your honey mustard, buffalo sauce, and honey?
Okay. Would that be all for you today?
Yes, ma'am.
Your total is $14.23. We'll see you at the window.
Thank you.
And we can stop here.
Roy, sorry, I was chuckling. That's the first lady's order was amazing. It was like, sorry, I couldn't help chuckling. Luckily, I was on mute. The second gentleman, you notice how he was very polite and he was speaking to your AI engine and he said, "Ma'am." I mean, there's been some debates about people with things like Alexa when they're talking to devices. They just say they want to do something, and there's been reports that people are losing their politeness when they're talking to their household gadgets because they don't say please or thank you. Amazing to see him be so polite talking to your thing there.
Yeah, I think this is a real interaction. You know, obviously in this case, you know, there was like a camera. We asked him to, is it okay if we take a video of you ordering? And he was okay with it. And, you know, and this guy, it's just a use case, you know, someone coming, you know, he obviously got instructions from his wife or someone, you know, what to order. So, you know, he's looking at the phone and ordering, and it's just acting naturally. I think what we see is that about 90% of the people actually are very friendly. We see a very small percent of people that get anxious, like the first lady, if you noticed, she wasn't, you know, okay, yes, got it, you know, thank you, you know, she already wanted to continue. But generally we see that people enjoy this experience. I think that what we are doing right now in the US, we are, you know, in the early stage of this technology. We are already taking orders in a few locations throughout the day, and customers are reacting really well to it. But in the future, and tying this into the experience, the beautiful presentation here that Nikk really presented, made me want to actually start driving into this one of these places. I think that AI can create a very compelling experience for users. Imagine that you come to this drive-thru, and it's like watching your favorite TV show. So you get the language is the language you like. You know, it's like sometimes you talk to a salesperson that really like gives you appetite to, you desire what they are selling you. So imagine that the language is going to be perfect, and the voice tone is going to be perfect, and it's just like some brands have their particular voice. And then I don't want to steal the thunder from the last thing that Nikk is going to show, but we can actually create a great experience. And especially when you're talking about multiple brands where someone has so many choices and they can create a unique combination of ordering, the AI can also help you make a choice. And if you also allow for personalization, so your history and your preferences are known, then now this experience can really be a unique experience for the customers, I think.
And Adrian, if I could add, right, when you saw that video, it was not like, everything was set in a sequential order, right? It was, I want all of this and let's double it. Or I want all of this honey mustard and everything else added. It's just like actually speaking to, an order taker. So what I want to highlight is, this is not just in production, but it is actually ready to be scaled. So, I mean, there's a lot of AI algorithms behind it, and, there's a lot of learning that needs to take place. But I think, Roy, correct me if I'm wrong, within a 6-week period, you are able to bring a site live, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think for the first a location of a concept, it takes about 6 weeks to start, getting the AI to a point where we can take orders. Then we have some optimization, but then the following locations are going to be very, very quick.
Is that because you're training for the accents of the local, or is it how people ask for the menu?
It's both. It's the accents. Sometimes you get new accents, like this guy that we saw here. That's a unique accent for Ohio. So that can be a challenge for the system. The second is the dialogue. So sometimes dialogues in different locations can look different, and people can sometimes call a dish not by its official name, but by a different name. Sometimes they, if it's someone that typically goes to Wendy's and now they came to Burger King, and they may use like a Wendy's terminology in Burger King. So, or for example, I'll give you a more simple example. Someone comes and wants a Diet Coke, and the location carries Pepsi. So the system would say, recognizes that, Coke is that what they actually wanted, the intent is clear, and would ask the person, is Diet Pepsi okay? Or is Pepsi Max okay? So that's how this conversation goes, just like you would expect from a person that has a general knowledge about this specific area.
So Roy, we have a question, but I think you sort of answered it really when you started off talking about how your AI was trained and you were focused on food or the food ordering system. The question says, surely order accuracy could be a major concern, but it sounds like order accuracy isn't a concern because of the way your system is trained. Is that correct?
First of all, order accuracy is always a concern. And as you scale these to new geographies, new concepts, menu changes, and new accents, new languages, sometimes like in the US, you have areas where they talk Spanglish. It was something new for me, but like mixing, in the south parts close to the Mexico border, they speak a different language, which is like a combination of English and Spanish. So those things are very challenging, and we have built a platform that is able to address these new cases as they come up, get this new data, add it to the training set, be able to correct mistakes, improve, and get the system to a point where it's going to work. It will always keep learning, but we want to make sure that the customer experience as we grow is still great.
Thank you. Nikk, you're going to laugh at this one because we talked about this one all those months ago when you and I were putting the concept together for this webinar, and from the same online viewer. And thanks for the questions. We really appreciate the questions. So they said that the AI seemed very impersonal. Well, Nikk, when we were talking about this, we were looking for, you've already mentioned it, Farhaan, so I'm allowed to mention it. We were looking for the Minority Report moment in the film. And Nikk and I both drilled down to find Demolition Man, very famous Wesley Snipes, Sylvester Stallone film with the first appearance of Sandra Bullock, if anybody's interested. And in the science fiction film set 20, 30 years ahead, when you call into the police station where a lot of the stuff is based, you have the option to speak to a human, or you have an option to press 2 and speak to an AI or a robot or a machine. And because everybody presses the button to speak to the AI, they have no interest in speaking to a human. So it's an interesting one, and I guess maybe that's also something that, Roy, you'll find out as you continue doing more and more trials and more pilots and sell more systems. And of course, Intel will monitor it as well, because will it be a generational thing? Will young people want to speak to the Alexas and the Siris and the Roy's system, or will they want to talk to people? And maybe actually you can have 2 lanes.
Yeah, based on preference. Again, it's another choice that could be made at the feeder lane, isn't it?
Yeah. But surely we're going, I mean, look, all these companies are trying to save as much money as possible, be as efficient as possible. And we all know, well, we all know that computers are more efficient than anything. So it may be something we're stuck with to answer the question. But I didn't think it was personal. I thought it was quite good. I thought it was fun. I don't know whether that fun wears off after you've done it a few times, but I just think it's great. I think it'll be, you know, the first people to do this in a big rollout are going to get so much positive PR from this. I think it's amazing. But sorry, carry on. Sorry, I keep stealing your thunder, Nick. Please carry on.
It's absolutely fine, no problem.
Nick, before you go ahead, can I just make a comment? You know, in that whole ordering process, when the driver came in, what you hear is not a robotic voice. It's an actual recording of the personnel in the QSR. So the AI kicks in only when you're taking the order, and then when you go to pick up the order, you know, you have that person actually there to provide you with the food. So that impersonal, I mean, we're trying to make it as narrow as possible so that, you know, you can take the order as accurately as possible and more accurately, so that, you know, once they get the food, they're not disappointed that somebody's messed it up because they were taking the order, they were, you know, trying to pack things up. They were not multitasking. So I think there's going to be a better experience overall because of this. Roy, I don't know if you agree. I mean, I'm sure you agree, but
I'm impressed, Farhaan. You became an operation expert in QSR. I think maybe you would lead the operations for one of the big brands on your in the future.
New career.
Let's move on.
So digital change 6 is essentially when you're thinking about this whole multi-lane, you know, really highly efficient drive-through. You know, the thought kind of struck us that, well, why couldn't you just use that exact same process to kind of automate the click and collect, so that, you know, rather than having someone going to an Amazon locker, for instance, getting out of the car, retrieving their item, well, why don't you just basically make the item retrieval use exactly the same transportation facilities as the food orders? So using like a robotized system could do exactly like that. And again, because we've got this capability to sense at the feeder lanes and as people are directed, we're aware of a pre-order as well as a click and collect order, and those two things can be orchestrated together so that the kind of delivery system at the kind of final touch point of the journey is basically able to deliver both or one or the other, essentially. The final change and the final slide really is this mixed reality ordering is what we're calling it. And this I think is it's the only thing I haven't really seen anything in the market at the moment. There are some examples of mixed reality and avatars and things like the banking environment. I think, Farhaan, you've got experience of that, haven't you? But in the QSR itself, especially if we're kind of going down this route where effectively everything is automated because all of the staff are in the you know, the kitchens above, we thought, well, it would be quite nice to bring the kind of the face back into the process, but still using the digital technology, essentially. So this person is not on the site, and this person might not even be a person. So, you know, it could be equally someone working in a call center or from home, or it could be an AI engine with you know, deep fake graphics being created real time to kind of basically take the extension of what Roy's got now into a kind of a full 3D avatar. But what I really like about this is I think all of the drive-through activity that's happened, you know, there's been so much investment into kind of digital menus and things like that, but we're still all talking into kind of a £10 speaker at the you know, beginning of the journey. And for me, you know, there's this kind of the benefits of having you look at a person, look at a face while you're ordering and have all your attention on that. You can capitalize on that. Because at the moment, if you think about it, people typically look at the speaker when they're ordering. So they use the totems, the menu totems they might look at before they start their order. But as soon as that order starts happening, they tend to be just looking at the speaker. It's just human nature. So if we replace that speaker with a screen and have a mixed reality version of the ordering process where we are basically bringing in machine learning to introduce recommendations. So leaving the human or the operative, let's call it the operative, to take the order and letting the system recommend upsell and cross-sell opportunities, then we think that's a really nice solution. I'm just going to move this over here just in case you can't, it stops you seeing the video, but here's the video.
Hi there, thanks for visiting. I can see you're looking to order from the Five Guys and Roasting Planet menus, and you also have an Amazon package to collect. What can I get for you?
Hi, can I have a double cheeseburger, please?
Sure. What toppings would you like?
Mushrooms and pickles, please. I'll try the small Cajun fries too.
No problem. And for your drink?
I'll try the acai and berry smoothie, please.
Would you like anything else?
No thanks.
No worries. That will be £15.95, please. Thanks for that. Your order and your Amazon parcel will be available at the next window shortly. See you soon.
So it's a very different experience to what we're used to, I think. And as I say, I think it works well with that otherwise fully automated, dark kitchen to bring some personality and some kind of human face to the brands that you're interacting with. And you'll have noticed as well that we did, as well as the prompts for the upsell and cross sells that the system was bringing onto the video stream and augmenting onto the kind of person. We were also recognizing the fact that someone had an Amazon package to collect, and the kind of operator was also aware of that as well. So it brings together all of those changes that we're kind of talking about in the prior slides into that kind of one touch point, really, where the customer is doing most of their interaction with the operator.
And Nick, you're suggesting that if they are people, I'm not sure I like now I've seen what Roy's done with just talking to the voice. I'm not sure I need the person, but are you suggesting that the person isn't on site? They don't go to that site to work there?
Yeah, I mean, they could be, obviously, but I mean, the whole point of the dark kitchen is to keep the number of staff down to a minimum who are on site, so that the administrative kind of staff who are literally kind of doing the keying and things like that, there's no need for them to be on site. They could absolutely be remote, either in a call center or even working from home, as long as.
I guess the working from home one is an interesting one, because if anybody banks with HSBC, I think they took all their call center staff from home at the beginning of COVID. I don't think they had particularly good network connectivity to start with. It's got better now, but again, when you're talking to them, you can hear all the things in the background, dogs barking and kids screaming in bits and pieces. So that's an interesting trend. But surely the way is just to talk to Roy's engine. What do we call your thing, Roy? Sorry, I'm not giving it a good name.
Yeah. Sorry. What was the question?
What do we call the technology? I keep saying Roy's thing. It's like
Roy's thing. Yeah. No. So the name of the company is Hi Auto, which is like hi for the conversation, like hi Google, and then auto is for automatic, so it's Hi Auto, and the conversational AI is the name of the category, but the name of the company is Hi Auto. Just I wanted to mention something interesting. I don't know if people saw that, but yesterday or the day before that, Google announced in Google I/O a new project called Project Starline. Oh, sorry, my phone started. Google phone started jumping. But a new project called Project Starline, type of video conferencing where it's actually where it creates like a 3D experience where you see the other party. It feels like the other party is there. So. So I think that can be actually even like, imagine, check out this project Starline, and now imagine what Nikk showed you, where the person feels like, it looks like the person is there. Okay, so you look at this screen, now you have the person there talking with just like a Minority Report, it's but better as far as the quality. So I think the best they could do in rendering at that time. When was the Minority Report?
15 years ago, I think, something like that.
2003.
Yeah.
Says Film Buff.
Much
2003.
So I think what we'll see in reality is actually better experience than what was shown there in Minority Report.
We have a question for Farhaan. Somebody thinks that they've seen something similar to this, maybe demonstrated at the Intel booth at CES. Have you deployed this somewhere, actually?
So, yeah, it's not for the QSR space. It was deployed for the banking space. So we have a couple of POCs that we're running. And there is one actual deployment in India today, where you have a virtual avatar that greets people as they come into the bank. And basically, if you have a prior appointment, it would actually tell you your appointment is in this particular room. You could go to that particular location, or you could simply ask some basic questions, but not as comprehensive as what Roy has built in terms of how you do the ordering. It's there just for some basic questions.
I think just to mention there, I think this space of synthetic characters that actually move their lips. You program the character once, and then you can decide what text is going to be spoken. That's being accelerated a lot, and the voices are better. But there is a company that Intel is working with called the Hour One that is doing it today for like Amazon and other companies, where you get a person to talk about a product, right? And instead of like having a text, now the text is actually read by a person that is smiling, and it looks very good. They have this. If you go to their site, they have this a test that they give you where you have like 4 people talking, and you need to decide which one is the real person. So that's it's very difficult.
Is that rendering in real time, Roy, or is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, not real time. It's almost real time. So I think it's going to be real time in the sense that it would be actually something that would be ready for this as well, I think.
Yeah.
But right now, I think it takes them like pre-processing and then it runs.
Yeah, I was going to say that's what we would expect, which is kind of why this is a bit of more of a futurology aspect of things, because obviously we could do the mixed reality with a person at the moment, but to the nth degree, and having that real-time rendering of a kind of a proper photorealistic avatar is well, it's not far away, it's live yet. It's
So we have a comment or sort of a question. Amazon Fresh, are they looking at any of this sort of stuff? I mean, there must be some similarities with their peopleless or the employeeless stores.
I don't know, not from my side.
I don't know that either, but I think what they've been focused on is on these autonomous stores, right, where you have no people. I mean, there are people stacking the shelves and stuff like that, but they want to have less interaction with the people, so that people can just pick the items and just walk out. So okay. I don't think
That's interesting, because from the caller we had earlier, that's truly impersonal. If you think about it, I mean, we're all in lockdown. Well, have been in lockdown. I don't really want to go to a store and not interact with. It's actually nice to speak to somebody, even if it's speaking to Siri or the Hi Auto engine, for example.
Adrian, it's going to cost you. If you want to talk to a person, there is going to be a special room. You can come in, and there is going to be a person. You will pay, and you'll be able to speak to that person. Otherwise, I think that to be serious, I think that the key is value to the customer. I think this is the key, and I think people value their time a lot. They don't want to wait. They want their food or their product or whatever to be provided quickly, accurately, and also personally. Now the question is whether I think it's an open question. Like, would you prefer to get the experience we talked about, the Starline experience, with a voice that you really like, a very polite language versus a human that is, you know, a human that sometimes is great, sometimes, you know, doesn't want to be there. I think the jury is still out on that part. And I also maybe just one more point. I think there is some areas, like if you look at hospitals, for example, and you look into the future at hospitals, there is a question whether we'll need medical doctors. My sister is a medical doctor. I'm telling her, I don't know, you know, what are you going to do in 20 years? Because there is, the decisions are going to be done, you know, are going to be automated by AI. But it's very clear that the nurses are going to still be needed because patients need humans to care for them and to, you know, to touch them and all of that. And I don't know how much you need that in the restaurant drive-through experience. I think that's a question.
Well, that was a fascinating conversation. We've just gone over the hour. I'd like to thank you all for your time. Nikk, especially, that was a fantastic thing we've put together. That must have taken a long time. And you do have some architect skills. I think if the award-winning digital signage agency should go by the wayside, just go become an architect.
Oh, okay.
So that works well. That was good.
I'll raise it in the next board meeting. Thanks for that.
Yeah. And Roy, we'd like to thank you for your time, especially you're in Israel. It's the Sabbath today for you, so thanks for coming online. And Farhaan, I think you're in the UK still at the moment, but again, thank all of you. This recording or this video or the webinar will be made available as a recording, and we'll let everybody know where it's gone. So should we do the Zoom wave to say goodbye? Make it obligatory.
Sure.
And then we'll sign out. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.